All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. We are live at 5. Mr. David Green, as usual, arriving on David Green time. He'll be here shortly. He's probably getting some people ready on Instagram. We have our guest introduction expert from all the way to in Austin, Texas. That's right, Rachel?
That's great. Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome, Rachel Duck, here to hang out. We're going to be talking about tax protest, how to protest your property taxes, what that's all about. A lot of people don't even know what that is, but we are in the midst right now of some crazy tax season. I've actually been seeing a lot of people talking about this. So we've got our in-house expert retreat member from the David Green retreat. We hung out in Scottsdale a few weeks ago,
Yep.
and we couldn't be more excited to have you here.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, just out of curiosity, let us know in the comments where you are coming from, where you're representing from. We got about 41 people jumping on right now. This is awesome. I love this. Even before we started at 4:55 p.m., Matthew came in and said he's hanging out from Richmond, Virginia. So welcome. But then you changed it. So I don't know what's going on here. You came in and said you were James from Richmond. So are you Matthew or are you James? Let us know who you are. And then let's see who else we got. Roberto Colon from Norwalk, California. Welcome. Great to have you here as always, as normal. Regular viewer for sure. Who else we got? Let's see here. Lydia, what's going on? Cool stuff tonight. Florida Keys representing. Ken Van Emergen. I can't say the last name. Sorry. What's going on? Yes, Dave will be here shortly from Tampa. We got another Florida representative. Very cool. Steven from NYC. Let's see who else we got here. Oh, very nice. Marnie, what's going on from Seattle? Welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us. Michael D. from Glendale. And Chris, once again, from Lowell. What's going on, my man? We had a good talk last night. Joseph Brown from NC. Madeline from Houston. Noah, what's going on? All the way. I love how these people all the way up in Alaska are joining. Good to see you again, Noah. Lindsay from Richmond. My girl Angela from the Spartan League representing, saying what's up from Pittsburgh. Perez from Orange County. What's going on? Jimmy, our man. What's up, man? I wish we could get you on camera right now and just show everybody how buff you're looking, how yoked you are. Lisa,
does anybody wonder how Jimmy's family ended up with the last name Wisecarver?
Like his lineage?
Think about that. Yeah, what was his great grandfather doing that they were like, that is a wise carver? Mm-hmm. What was he carving? What was he making? Was this whittling? Was this a butchering type of a thing? And how would someone who's a butcher become known as wise? Did you wait for your cow to be butchered or your deer, and during that his grandfather was dispensing age-old wisdom? It's just a very cool, odd name, which also would bring us back to Rachel. How did your family get your last name?
I have no idea, to be honest. I just got lucky, I guess.
Were you the pioneers of ducklift, do you think? Before it was cool? Were people doing that in your family?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Before it was cool.
Well, I interpreted it as the verb to duck.
You get a lot of different interpretations. And I used to teach 6th grade way back when, and so I got a lot of comments.
Is there a bad way of interpreting it that 6th graders came up with?
They just made a lot of jokes, there's a lot of different funny stuff.
A duck is a funny animal, right? It begs jokes to be made about it. You can't look at a duck without finding it humorous when you watch them stick their head under the water and their butt comes up, when you watch them paddle, when you watch them waddle around. Yeah.
And now that I've got twins and I've got 3 little kids that are close in age, so everyone, there's your ducklings. I'm I haven't heard that before.
Oh, it's all the pain from your own childhood is coming back. You're remembering what that was like.
We got Lisa saying what's up, happy Friday. Sean from Michigan. We got a lot of people representing tonight, guys. Devin says he can't watch too long. Obligations to help the wife. Thank you for doing these. You're welcome, but you know what? You got to take care of family first. So we
put us on in the background, Devin. Maybe your wife will enjoy.
Yes.
We're gonna be bringing the heat tonight.
Yes, we will. And these get recorded too. So
bring her into your world. She may like that.
Bring her into Rachel's world too. Have her come in, maybe chat with Rachel.
Yeah.
Good point. We're actually going to be talking about relationship advice with Rachel Duck today.
Oh,
so you're
no. Oh.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Twist.
David, the shirt's looking good too. Have you gone through a wash yet with the Spartan League Grunt shirt?
Can I say on a YouTube live the honest answer to that while Kyle just went blank? I don't know that I should, because this is going to now be saved in the annals of the internet lore forever. The reason you often catch me in a tank top is because I don't like doing laundry. And as long as I take the shirt off before I sweat, or if I eat or anything that would make it dirty, I just wear it for this, hang it back up in the closet, and then don't have to wash it. And then it doesn't shrink. Like, you guys have seen me in the schmediums. Like, Rachel, I think you probably caught a couple of those when we were in Scottsdale, that you're like, dude, he can afford a bigger shirt. Like, why is he wearing one of those? It fit when I bought it, but then you wash them and they get too small. But if you buy it bigger so that you can wash it to where it would fit you, it's too baggy. I have a weird body. It's hard to get it just right, and I end up with medium when I don't want it. So that is the long answer, Kyle, to your very succinct question.
Yeah, but it was a well thought out answer, and it makes sense. So I think people will understand after having heard that you didn't wash it, but there's a good reason why, and it's in good shape. Like, we're not thinking it's going to be full of BO.
Here's another thing. Marnie Ocean, she's making the point my mom always made, okay? It's good logic. It's female logic. You got to wash your shirts in cold water. Yes, women know that. Men don't, okay? But here's the problem. Even when we wash it, it doesn't shrink as much. It still shrinks. I'm telling you, every man has had a hoodie that was his favorite shirt, and our mom washed it. Kyle, did that not happen? And it ruined your hoodie.
Too many times.
The hood gets all tight and shrunk up. It starts to get tight around your neck. It doesn't have the softness that it used to. It gets stiff and it shrinks. Hoodies are not meant to be washed. There's a softness to them. And of course, she's saying hang dry. This is all the women there. This is my arguments with my mom for my entire teenage years, which she would say the same thing. I'd be like, it's not as bad as if you wash it, but it's still not as good as when it was brand new. So I just grew up not liking spending money on anything. So I would be very careful that I wouldn't ruin my clothes. That's the truth. You guys way more about my life than you probably ever wanted to know.
And I can just picture David going, Mom.
Yes.
Like, I could see you doing that.
Oh, she used to do this thing where if I left a shirt where it didn't belong, every mom's about to be triggered right now. First off, in my defense, this is before I listened to Allison Armstrong. This was like BAA, before Allison Armstrong, in my life. And I didn't understand the way that men's brains versus women's brains look at things. Allison has taught me that women's brains have what she calls diffuse awareness, which means they are aware of their environment all the time. Like, if a picture's hung crazy on a wall, if the color scheme is wrong, if there's a sock on the floor, it's actually screaming at her, there's something wrong, fix me. And they can't focus until the sock is put away. Every woman's like, obviously, I did not know that my brain worked differently than my mom's, right? Because I can see a sock on the floor and it doesn't yell at me. It doesn't say anything. I just walk over it and I don't move it until there's so many socks on the floor that there's not a path to go where I want to go, because men have single focus. We just think about, like, how can I be productive? Putting away sock does not feel productive to me, so I won't do it. I'll do something else. Well, this is what drove my mom crazy, was I would take off my sweatshirt so I wouldn't get anything on it. I had no idea I was going to go into this. Hopefully you guys don't mind it. I would go to the dining room table and I would put it on the back of a chair and then go eat in the kitchen so that it would not get dirty, thinking that I'm saving my sweatshirt and saving our family on the clothing budget, because I'm not ruining it. And then, like every 16-year-old, I would forget that I had did that, or just thought, there's no one else using the chair. Why would we need to move the sweatshirt? And then my mom would see it and be pissed, but she would never admit she was pissed, because then she would have to be direct. And that's not how Allison Armstrong says that women prefer to communicate. So instead, she would wash it and ruin it. And then I'd be upset, and she would say, well, if you didn't want it washed, you shouldn't have left it there. And that passive aggressive dig. Yeah. See that faces Kyle made? That's exactly how I looked at it. And I knew this was her way of punishing me for doing the thing I didn't want, but I didn't know how much that was bothering her to leave it there. So now if I'm ever in a situation where, like, I have to live with my mom again, I'll be much better at doing things. Long story short.
That's really, really well said. And I can tell you, like, in my household, I just do my own laundry now. And that takes everything out. Like, I use a special detergent that I like just for me. Makes it so much easier when you do your own laundry, because then you don't have to worry about pointing the finger, or you didn't understand, or I
Or
missed.
you don't have to worry about them like, I can't do anything right. You should just move on. And like, I can't even get laundry. And like, I'm not going to cook either because I suck at everything. And now like you're consoling this person whose feelings you hurt on accident. And like, yeah, man, I hear you.
Yeah.
Just do it yourself. That's really good advice for everyone here.
Yes. Joseph says, I think I logged in on the wrong podcast, Laundry with DG. That's actually the cool thing about these YouTube lives, right? Like, it's not meant to be the David Green podcast that you're normally hearing. This is the real David Green that you get to see
You
behind.
never know where it's going to go,
You
what these
never
intros
know.
are going to be.
Laundry advice that's a life skill.
Yes, it is. So this is really good. I'm really excited about tonight's topic. Sergio popped in the question, what are we talking about tonight? Well, if you look at the title up above, it says protesting property taxes in today's market, expert insights and advice. David, do you mind before we jump in? Well, before we even jump in, guys, do us a favor. If you're watching this right now, if you're live, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with your friends, share this with your family, bring your friend and your family in, because we want to make sure the word gets out on this. But David, do you mind kind of just painting a little bit of a canvas for us here? Why are we even talking about property taxes? I've been hearing a lot of people bring it up. It's an important thing. But I think there's a lot of like maybe misconceptions around property taxes in general, and why they're important to the average investor, why they're important to us in our portfolio. So give us a little backdrop of why we're even bringing this subject up today.
Well, for a long time, we made money in real estate by buying more of it. And as values continue to increase over a long period of time, rents went up. We didn't really pay attention to operations. Like, think of the last time you heard a podcast that talked about how to operate your asset better or how to decrease your expenses. NOI was improved primarily and only by increasing rents. No one was talking about how to decrease expenses. And that's fine, because you could make a lot more wealth buying properties than micromanaging the ones you already had. The market has shifted. I don't know if there's anybody here who's having an amazing time finding tons of great deals, but I don't know anyone out there who is. It's very hard to do that. And as we're looking to try to make more money, as we're looking to try to improve our financial position, it's not purely offense. It's not purely going out there and acquiring more stuff. Now we have to look at what we already have and making it operate more. And property taxes, as properties have increased in value, have gone up as well, depending on what your market is. Some markets where they just stay the same at whatever you paid for the property when you bought it is where they set your taxes. Other ones reassess them at different times. So we have Rachel Duck here, an expert who does this for a living and is pretty bad ASS at doing this. We met her at our Scottsdale retreat, had a great time there. Rachel was very impressive and impressed a lot of people with a skill set that not many people have. So Rachel has a portfolio of properties herself. She's also doing very well. She's a wonderful person, and we wanted to share her with all of you guys, talking about how the process works to protest your property taxes and have them lowered. And that's extra important right now, because as values are rising, that is a cost that can quickly get out of hand. So Rachel, do you think I missed anything there?
I don't think so. And thank you for the intro. I started in property tax in 2009, and I'm in Texas. And if you have any properties in Texas, it is one of the largest line items on your P&L. And for most of our clients, we do commercial properties exclusively, but the process is pretty comparable for residential or commercial. And some of the line items, our tax rates in Texas, they've been pushed down a little bit, but they're 2 to 3%, and they're reassessed every single year. For the most part, at 100% of market value. There's some exclusions in there, particularly for residential. But just for my background, I practice exclusively in Texas, so I can speak to some of the other jurisdictions on just process. A lot of it's similar and ideas behind it. But I've been practicing here for 15 years, I guess. And it's been fun. Like, it seems like you say property tax and people think you're a CPA, but my background's in real estate valuation, and it's been a great ride. In Texas right now, if anyone watching is in Texas or involved in politics, our legislature is in session, and the number one hot topic is property tax reform. So We are advocating to not California or Texas with some of the caps because there's some ramifications there. But we do have caps in place here for homestead properties, which is a particular subset of residential properties. So I'm happy. I don't know, David, if you want me to walk through the process or how you guys want to.
What do you think, Kyle? Where should we start?
Well, first of all, yeah, I forgot to say this part. Anybody that maybe is interested, because I know we've had a lot of interest from different people about protesting their property taxes, what goes in on that. And yes, as Rachel mentioned, right, she's only skilled really and licensed or whatever in Texas. So different municipalities, different states may be different, but she can definitely give you some advice, some insight, or some feedback on your different areas. So here's what you can do. If you want to come on and actually talk with David, talk with Rachel, myself live here on the YouTube Live, send a text message to the number below. It's 833-777-0309. If you look at the bottom of the screen here, send a text message, give us your name and where you're located and what your question is. We would love to have you come on and talk a little bit more about that. So Rachel and David, we can take this any direction, but Rachel, what do you primarily focus on? Do you work for just the average investors? Do you work for bigger companies? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we are a full service firm. So we call it start to finish. So it starts with the legislature. There's a couple phases in Texas and in most states they have similar where there's a protest phase and there's litigation. So we're a law firm as well. Our focus is commercial properties, but that's a wide breadth. So we have a lot of institutional properties, some of the bigger players who have an actual property tax department and have nationwide portfolios that are billions of dollars. And then we have some smaller investors. We have a lot of multifamily investors who have an apartment or two that are really struggling with managing their property tax expense. It's a process that you can do on your own, and especially if you have a residential portfolio. And as long as you know that process, you can, or you can hire counsel to help with either the first step. I mean, obviously, if you go through litigation, you'll need to hire a law firm to help with that piece, and sometimes it's necessary depending on the values at play. But in Texas, it's a big expense, so it makes sense for a lot of our clients to kind of push on it because, like I mentioned, every year we're reassessed as of January 1st. So we've seen last year, I'm in Austin. Travis County is the county in Austin, and we practice across the state. But last year for 2022, commercial residential properties went up about 100% overall. Like people would get their tax. It's called a notice of appraised value that you get at first before you get the tax bill because tax rates are set separately. And it's like, oh my gosh, because the market was just crazy. They overshot it some, but it was like, if you don't know the process and all of a sudden your tax liability doubles and you've got a rental portfolio, you can't necessarily increase your rents enough to offset the costs.
Yeah.
And I experienced that myself. I have a handful of residential rental, like single family homes in the greater Austin area. And one of them, the monthly expense due to property taxes went up $800, and I could not increase my tenants $800. So we're dealing with that. If you're in your primary residence, you have a homestead, you can have a homestead exemption, which would cap that. But because of all this, and last year commercial properties went up, 50, 60, 70, 80%. Values are just coming out for 2023. So this is kind of the height of our work season in Texas. We're gearing up for the summer, and they're up again. I was wondering if they would notice lower because of the rise in interest rates and what investors are actually experiencing. And a lot of our clients are like, we cannot refinance, we cannot, like our values, we can't sell. But we've gotten Travis County, Harris County's out around Houston. All of them are up 20, 30%. So the counties are not necessarily yet recognizing the market. And generally there's a lag of some sort, but it's definitely a good time to pay attention and protest.
So specifically for Texas here, a few things to point out that will make this make more sense. Texas and other states with no state income tax, but specifically Texas, have much higher property tax percentages than other states. So even though California has ridiculously high income tax, I think it's like 13.5% or something that we pay here, they try to raise it to 19%. So if you don't live in California, what that means is if your normal tax bracket is at 35%, you then owe 13% on top of that, which they try to bump up to almost 20%, which means if you're 35, you're now bumped up to 55. If you were at 45, you're now bumped up to like 65. Like that is how bad it can be. Well, states like Texas get the majority of their revenue from property taxes. So they are, what are they, Rachel? Right around like somewhere between 2.2 and 3% usually?
Typically, yeah. We had some legislative change that kind of forced compression as values came up. So some of them went below 2 this past year, but generally we used to kind of, if we were just quick guessing, be 2.5%. Now I've lowered that to 2.2.
But can you imagine 2.5% property taxes on anything for those of us that don't live in Texas, right? In California, Prop 13 limits them to 1%. They can't go higher than that. If they're going to collect any other taxes, they're not collected by the state. They can be collected by a local municipality. So they can have special assessments that they can throw on there. Out here, we call them mellow roos. I don't know if that's a phrase that is known in other parts, but you may buy into an area where the developer had to take out a bond to create the space, and then the owners have to pay back that bond and they collect extra taxes, but it's still nothing like 2.5%. That's literally 2.5 times what a person in California would have to pay, and it get up to 3%. I've seen that on some of them, right? So my taxes on a property could be $500 a month. That could be $1,500 a month. This is a very significant number that we're talking about here. And now with commercial property specifically, here's what has been happening. Everyone has seen, as we've printed more money, it has flooded into the real estate space. Well, it has had an effect on residential properties, but not nearly like commercial, because when money tends to flood to the hands of the smartest people, it doesn't go to your average Joe who's turning a wrench at a mechanic shop. Not that he's smart, but he's probably not financially savvy. And so that person's going to go buy a duplex or a condo or a house, and they're going to go up a little bit more because there's more money. But when it goes to the person that manages $30 million, they don't go buy duplexes. They have to buy big assets that create stable cash flows. These are apartment complexes. These are self-storage units. These are triple net properties. These are strip malls. Anything basically like campgrounds, RV parks, mobile home parks. They're more expensive, and their value is based on the money that they can make. Right now, we talked about this in Spartan League about cap rates. So anybody here who's a Spartan League member recently learned about this. You value these commercial properties by taking their NOI, which is the fancy word we're going to use for their profitability, and dividing that by the cap rate for the location. As more people have flooded into commercial properties and demand has gone up, you have seen cap rates go down, which means that you're dividing what the number they make by a smaller number, which means you get a bigger value, which means the properties, as cap rates have compressed, have become more and more expensive to buy. Well, if you bought it for $9 million and now it's worth $12 million because cap rates have come down and you've increased rents, if you're in California, it doesn't matter. You paid this price. That's what your property taxes are. So we see, like, some of our grandparents that have owned homes, their property taxes are incredibly small because they bought it 30 years ago. Well, if they reassess your property and say, now it's worth 12 million, not 9 million, your property taxes could go up by that 33% jump. And they're already at 3% or 2.5%. They're already really high. So it's not like if my insurance went up by 30% and it was $50 a month and now it's $70 a month, that's not fun, but it doesn't destroy anything that I did. But if my taxes go up by 30%, okay, they were, I don't know, I could throw up a number like 10 grand. Now they're 13 grand. So let's say that my taxes were 10 grand and my overall cash flow was like 5 grand or something. My cash flow went from 5 grand to 2 grand from one thing that I didn't even do anything to trigger. The market itself made the property worth more. So now people will reach out to someone like Rachel and her firm to say, we got to protest this. I need to get out there in the streets with my sign and march around and say, these taxes are too damn high. Is that what protesting taxes is?
That's what I do. That's what I lead some marches all the time. No, so in the process, and of course, I'm speaking particularly to Texas, but it's pretty similar in most states. It's just the timing's different. So Texas, it's every year. And for most of our clients, we just have them every year. We're going to do this because typically you can get results. They might not be, it might vary based on what the market's doing, but what we do in Texas is called a two-step process, and in most jurisdictions it's similar. So what we're doing right now is we're seeing the values come in from they're called county appraisal districts in Texas. They're assessors districts in other states, but we're getting the values, and then we have a 30-day window where we can file a protest. So by protest, we mean it's basically you're filing a document that says, I do not agree to the value that's on this property. And so you have in Texas a 30-day window, other deadlines in different states where you just submit that documentation. And a lot of places have it online now. So if you're a smaller owner and not hiring representation, it's pretty easy to just, you'll get your notice, you click it, say, I'm going to protest. And I would recommend, I mean, if you have the resource of time to just do it, if you have a portfolio, because a lot of times you can always withdraw, but you can get some results even if you don't want to go all the way through. And so you file that protest, and then here we go and meet on behalf of our clients with they're called appraisers in Texas. They'd be called assessors in other states. But you meet with them, you try and see if you can reach an agreement. If you don't reach an agreement, we have a formal hearing. It's called an appraisal review board hearing. It's just a panel of 3 to 8 citizens, usually retired people, that come sit on a panel and hear your mini case all day. So you're not yet in a court of law. It's just kind of a little mini review board. So a consultant or an owner can do it without legal representation. And you basically, you present your valuation case. And so typically for commercial income producing properties, it's income. You look at the income approach, find the cap rate, kind of what David was saying, and present on that. On a lot of properties, jurisdictions will use cost depending on if it's a new build or if it's kind of like a single tenant, like you've got a warehouse space that's owner occupied. RV parks, we see both income and cost. Typically, we've been trying to argue cost on some of them because the income's just crazy, but they always want in Texas, we're a non-disclosure state, so sales prices are not out there unless they're out there. So if they're on the MLS, the county appraisal districts aren't technically supposed to get them, but they will. Or if it's like, you bought this big hotel for $100 million, and there's a press release, well, they're going to know that. Or CoStar, they'll look at CoStar, but our experience, it's not always accurate, or it's like a portfolio sale or whatever. But you'll go in, present either cost, income, sales. Sales is obviously most persuasive if it helps you. And then in Texas and in most states, there's another provision. We call it an equal and uniform provision, which is basically looking at how your value is assessed by the jurisdiction in comparison to other properties. So that's a real big help later in the process a lot of times. So if you've got an RV park and you're assessed either if they're looking at it by site or based on a cap rate, and you look at some of your competitors and they achieved a more favorable assessment, you can argue based on that. That's another remedy. And most states have a remedy. We have a really great one in Texas, which we fight to keep every legislative session. And so you go before the board. We have the fortunate situation here in Texas where we almost always know our result day of. In other states, sometimes that first step takes a longer time and you don't know your result. But we walk out knowing, hey, this is good, or we're going to have to sue. And then you sue in the fall, try and resolve it. And for a lot of our clients, especially in the commercial space, litigation is usually beneficial in Texas. And by litigation, we don't take things to trial. Very, very, very rarely. It's a settlement process, but you can usually achieve a better result. And it's worth it because it's such a big expense on some of these properties. I mean, we'll have investors. We do forecasts all the time, which, gosh, hate doing forecasts because you're just kind of, you don't really know what's going to happen, but, based on your experience, and it'll kill a deal because the property tax line item can be so significant that it could completely kill a deal. So
can you break down what you mean by litigation? Are you saying after you own it, when you're protesting it, if the government disagrees, you actually have an opportunity to sue them, and before it goes all the way to court, you can have a mediator that will come up with a
Yeah. So the first step, that first, we call it an administrative protest. It's not litigation. So you go before, owners can do it on their own or hire a consultant who's not an attorney. And when you you can either settle it or you have your hearing. You have to have a hearing at that step. You can't jump to litigation, or you haven't exhausted your administrative remedies, is what we call it. You have your hearing. You don't like the result, then you can file. And in Texas, it goes to district court. Some other states have specific, like Florida's got a system that's great with property tax tribunal court system. Ours goes to a regular district court. So a judge that hears, a divorce case, a criminal case, they're going to hear a property tax case too. So it's an interesting scenario when you actually do take it to trial. But we very rarely, it's because it's such an expense to take them all the way to trial.
So I'm curious, how suing the government, like, how does that work? Because I feel like, wouldn't they just a judge is now going to look at this thing, or a mediator, and give you an opinion that is better than the people who work for the government that do this for a living?
Well, so before we get to the judge, for most of our cases, and for most everybody who practices in this space, like 90% of them we settle with. And it depends on the appraisal district. A lot of times it's the same guy or gal that you've worked with at the first place. Sometimes they have a split system where it's a litigation person. But typically we'll just go in, meet with them, even before a mediation, an informal settlement conference, and we'll agree to a value. If that doesn't work, I probably overestimated 90, probably 85% of our cases settle that way. Probably 10% we do have to do a mediation where, like you said, David, you get a mediator. We're both just mediators going back and forth, just trying to reach a resolution like you would in any other case, like divorce or whatever case you have. And then you'll settle. Very rarely, if you do go all the way to district court trial, yes, you have a judge that, for the most part, or jury, you can choose jury as well, but either way, they don't really know a lot about property tax, because why would they? And it's this very complex situation you're trying to break down to someone who really doesn't care.
That's what I'd be thinking. It's not a thing people are just walking around knowing how to do.
No, and some of these cases are so theoretical. Like, we do a lot of big box retail, which there's so much like theory on how to value them. It's just real hard to get your point across, that, and for both sides, for the county and for us. So that's that, in addition to the cost. It's really expensive to go to trial. So most of the times it's beneficial for both sides to settle, even before mediation. But we do take some of them to trial.
Well, is there any harm in protesting?
No, I can't speak specifically outside of Texas. We used to, when I first started practicing, just protesting. Okay, I say no. I'll put a little asterisk, because there's always a little asterisk. For most of the cases, no, there's no harm. The only situation would be is if there's something weird about your property. So say I had a self-storage facility that I got really lucky, and they noticed it at 1.2 million, and I had just bought it for 7 million, and I'm like, but I think I could get it lower. There is a provision in our tax code where the chief appraiser can reassess. They can say, oops, I messed up.
Yeah,
and go back.
If you call attention to it, that's kind of
and so it usually doesn't happen. It usually, like, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've had it happen probably twice. But it can happen. They have the right to do that. Be like, oh, it's a substantial error. So they realize, whoa, and then they see it, and then they're like, wait a second. So in that case, if those were the facts, I would probably recommend to my client, let's just leave this. Let's just let this be for this year. But that typically doesn't happen. Typically, the appraiser will say, hey, I think we undershot this, but I'm not going to reduce it any further if they found out. But that's the only caveat. So if you have a really weird situation, but if it's a pretty simple case where it's like, hey, I think I've got a little bit of an argument, but there's nothing that would just destroy my value if they found out, there's not really harm. So in Texas, and some states still may be this way, if you're just going in and negotiating informally, you can always withdraw your protest. You can always, even if you're like, I don't know, I'm just going to try, I can always withdraw. But it used to be when you went before the appraisal review board, they could raise your value. So as a consultant, that was terrifying because you would be representing your client, and you had the potential to make their situation worse based on what these 3 to 8 people decide. And in all my years, I had it happen once, and it was like the worst day of my career. And we ended up filing litigation. We got it resolved, but that's a horrible thing to tell.
It's kind of like you're playing The Price is Right, and you win a brand new barbecue, and they're like, "Do you want to trade this in and try to get that car?"
Right.
Like, I do want that car, but I also could use this barbecue. Is it worth it to go in there and risk it?
I know. And that call to happen, I'm like, oh man. And it usually didn't happen. But anyways, they changed the tax code. So our firm is really active at the legislature, and we really pushed for this, and thank God they changed it. So now you can't get raised. So there's the people districts obviously hate that because they're like, well, what's the incentive for people not to try? It's like, well, there's really not. So we can't get raised. And when you file litigation, there's no risk up until the point of trial, because you as the plaintiff, you're the plaintiff. If you're the property owner, you can always withdraw. You can always non-suit your case. You can always say, never mind, this isn't going anywhere. You're just out the filing fee, or, we're contingency based. Some people's representation might be hourly, so you'd be out your representations fee. But if you take it to trial, anything can happen. And so that's the other big risk factor why people don't go to trial, because that random district court judge can say, you know what, I think this value is way too low, and you're going to double, and then that's what you're stuck with. So
you had me realizing when you were talking that if you just mix up the A and the E, Texas becomes taxes. Have you ever thought of that?
No, but now I will.
That could be like a marketing ploy, right? We take taxes and make them Texas or something like that. And I did believe you mentioned this earlier, but remind me, is this something that applies to residential and also commercial? Or did you just say your company only does commercial?
We only do commercial, but the system's pretty much the same for residential. What's being discussed right now at the legislature is our caps. So you guys are familiar with those. And we don't know yet what's going to happen. It's they might go into special session over this. So they're discussing whether they would cap everything, commercial and residential, at 5%, or whether they would just cap all residential, not just primary residence homesteads, which I don't, there's a lot of, in my mind, negatives to caps with slowing down transactions and inequity, especially on commercial. But right now, what we have on residential is a capped system only for primary residences. So if it's your homestead and you file, so say I bought my house for $600,000, I file a homestead. The next year, the assessed taxable value can't increase more than 10% as it stands now. Obviously, that creates inequities for rental properties. So as a landlord, I don't get the benefit of those caps. And so when my property taxes go up, hypothetically, you'd be passing that on to your tenants, and it impacts the demographic that are renters more. Yeah. Of course, we all know in reality, you can't really pass all of those on and get people to actually stay. But that is a discussion point too, because it's impacting renters to benefit homeowners. But I don't think residence homestead caps are going away at any time in Texas. It's a pretty hard sell politically to remove that. We'll probably see that cap either decrease to 5% or expand to other residential properties, but that's all to be determined in the next few months.
Rachel, I want to get to Karen's question, and then we've got a caller that is here, and we're going to get to her as well. But before we do that, Karen asked the question, Rachel, what do you find is the strongest evidence in protesting property taxes? One of her mortgage payments increased by 40%. She's in Texas.
I feel you, Karen. I feel that. So in Texas, I mentioned this briefly. There's 2 avenues of protest. It's market value, and we call it equal and uniform. And so the best case scenario is that you have a purchase price that helps you. Now, that's probably not the case in most situations. So the best evidence, if I were to go before an appraiser or an appraisal review board, is I bought my house For 400,000, you have it at 6. You're almost always going to get that. But again, that's typically not, it's either usually haven't purchased it recently, or maybe your purchase price is not helpful. If you have comparable sales that support a lower valuation, that's of course really helpful as well. You can get the appraisal district's evidence if you don't have access, or if you have a realtor who can access MLS. I'm assuming that you're speaking of residential, but if you're speaking of commercial, then obviously that's a different scenario. But for residential, it's mainly sales for your market. You're not really going to run an income approach on a house. And so it's sales, or in some weird scenarios, maybe cost, but it's mainly sales. But what really can help sometimes is equal and uniform. So that's data that everybody has access to, even if you can't get an agent or someone with MLS access to pull sales comps. You can look at the county appraisal district's website, and they've got the map. You can pull up your property. So like if you're in, I don't know which jurisdiction you're in, but if you're in Dallas County, DallasCAD.org, I think, or .com. Some of them are different, but you pull it up, you put in your property, you can pull up the map, you can search for comps, and depending on your neighborhood, it might be easy or hard just to kind of see like what's actually comparable, and see if that helps. Now on residential, sometimes it doesn't, just because they do a pretty good job kind of keeping houses uniform. But I would definitely look at the appraisal district's evidence. So you can protest, just go ahead and protest. If they went up 40%, either hire somebody. Residential consultants typically will take 30 to 40% of tax savings. So typically a contingency fee. They don't get, I mean, some of them now are doing kind of a base like filing fee and then a contingency fee, but you can do it yourself. Just file and then request their evidence. And you can start there by picking apart what sales data they have, and what equity comps they have as well, to kind of push on that.
So, and I'd imagine these assessors' offices, because I mean, kind of back it up a little bit for people that maybe are just brand new to real estate, or they haven't been around for very long. There's not an individual appraiser going out to these properties and looking inside people's houses, right? So where typically do municipalities get their data from to determine the actual value of the home?
Yeah, my dad, it's funny, my dad lives here too, and he's convinced. I mean, I've been doing this a while, but he still doesn't want to take my advice. He's convinced they're coming around and looking at his house. So he's like, I'm not fixing my siding. they're going to raise my, it's not really that way it works.
Yeah.
So they have, like, you think about the appraisers, they have only, most county appraisal districts have maybe 100, maybe 200 people. Harris County is an exception. They're just a behemoth, but that's Houston. But they have to do mass appraisal. So they don't have the luxury of doing an individual appraisal on every single property, particularly residential. They have a system that just kind of says, okay, in this market, this is what we're doing per foot, and plop it out. And so when people receive their notice and they're offended because, hey, my roof has been leaking. Well, the appraiser doesn't have the luxury of knowing that when they're getting the values out. Mm-hmm. So that's why we have this process. So if you have particular details on your home, they're happy to hear them. They want to resolve. I mean, it's not really a super adversarial process, particularly in residential. When we get into some of our higher value commercial, it can be, but they're trying to get to a value that makes sense. They just don't have the data that you have. So if you protest, they welcome data, and particularly if it's sales data. I mean, they typically, at least in Texas, they send out forms at the start of the year if they see a transaction, and ask people for that. Now, I always advise my clients never to give it, but if it's helpful, then maybe they're just trying to collect the data they can, because it's hard here. They don't have access to sales. And so, yeah, don't be offended by it. I would just say protest, meet with them, take the time. And in most cases now, they're meeting virtually for that first phase and for the hearings. If you want a virtual hearing, most of the counties are doing that now, unless you're just in a really rural jurisdiction. I think, well, they'll do telephone, but it takes like 15 minutes for the informal meeting, and you might save yourself a lot of money just by having a dialogue.
So the government's not out completely to get you and create these big conspiracies, but in reality, they want to hear what you have to say if you disagree with the value of your home, and they want to learn that data that you're sharing.
Yeah, they want to get it right. Where it becomes, and I understand their position too, where it becomes where people who don't necessarily understand the process and just go in screaming that they can't afford their taxes. Well, the appraiser's role is not to make your taxes affordable. Their role is to get the value of the property correct. And so that's all they can do. They don't impact tax rates. And so what they always tell us, we had a seminar this week we hosted, and the chief appraisers from some of the big counties were there, and they were like, we just want to make it clear. Very, very few people go and protest tax rates, which you can actually, you can't protest the same way, but you can go sit at the hearings where all your local entities are deciding their budgets that are going to determine the rates, and try to impact your elected officials there, because rates should be going down if values are going up. The reason they don't typically is because budgets go up too. And so that's a whole separate process. So if you're dealing with an appraiser, and in most states it's the same thing, appraiser or assessor, they're just trying to determine the value. They're not trying to just pull money out of you. They don't really have anything to do with that. But if you have evidence, or even if you want to see their evidence, it's worthwhile, and just have a dialogue, and it doesn't need to be real.
Okay, cool. So speaking of evidence, we actually have a caller here that I'm going to bring on right now. Angela Haydorn is here to hang out with us, and I believe she has in her hands her actual appraisal that she recently received, as well as the protest form. Do I have that right, Angela?
Yes.
So would you mind sharing with us and Rachel here a little bit about the background of what's going on, and then any questions that you have?
I just don't understand why Texas is so expensive. So I bought a property in 2021, and every year my taxes, they go up so much because obviously the appraised value keeps going up. Mm-hmm. And I think it's funny because I own properties in a couple different states, and Texas is the only one that they include a form for you to protest the taxes, which is like a sign. Okay, they know it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So I guess my biggest question is, they're saying the value went up $70,000 based on improvements. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's just a generic term, because I did some improvements when I bought it. It's a short-term rental. It's in Galveston County.
Okay.
And
I will pause you for 1 second and say Galveston is notorious for really high increases, but they're also pretty great to deal with to get it down. So,
interesting. Yeah, it's. I feel like maybe I'm just playing the victim here, but I feel so I'm on the Crystal Beach side, mm-hmm. and I feel like the improvements that they do for the city taxes and stuff, Galveston sees it, but the Crystal Beach side, there's literally no improvements to that mm-hmm. side. But I guess my question is how do I fill out the form? Is it likely? I mean, it's pretty easy. I just fill out a form, send it in. I don't know if it looks like maybe there is a Zoom call or something. But I guess is it worth filling it out and sending it in, because they just added $70,000 to my property.
Yeah. So yours is a residential short-term rental, right? Is that
mm-hmm.
correct? So the way that they typically do the value, and not knowing your particular property, but they typically find an aggregate, a total value. So based on sales data or market trends. And so it happens generally that is a residual improvement increase if their land didn't increase. So in most counties, land is a separate department. So you've got these land guys that spend a lot of time analyzing land values, and they're usually pretty good or sometimes low on land. We'll try to argue land all day long, and it's very rare that we win on land. But you'll have the land set. So they'll set the land across. And then if they say okay, your land value is 100,000, we think your total value is 400, they'll just back out the improvement value. So it's not necessarily them saying or implying that you improved your property. It's them saying the building, the residual value after the land went up because the market, in their opinion, indicated a higher value. And so it's probably based on what they have as sales data. But I would recommend just doing the process. You don't have to hire anyone, and it's a pretty smooth process, I believe. And so I believe Galveston probably has an online portal as well at this point, where you could go and just submit your opinion of value. So say you submit whether it's last year's value or whatever you think it's worth, and then request their evidence. And even if you don't have any evidence of your own at that point, you can pick through what they have. And so before meeting informally with the appraiser, just go through what they have and come with questions, or say, you're using this sale. And a lot of times their evidence, maybe it's because, like we mentioned, it's mass appraisal, it's broad. And it might be maybe they're pulling from an area that you're like, hey, that sale is actually not really comparable. And I know it because of this or whatever. I think it would be worth your time, or at least the experience too, to do it. And you can do it remotely. So you don't have to actually be there.
Okay, great. So there's a box that says, just to provide any additional facts.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to so I don't need to put a lot of detail, like I added a garbage can holder and I added this and that was it. So
No. Only if there's something really negative that's big, we had a foundation issue, or there was otherwise don't, but make sure. So the form should say protest market and then protest equal and uniform. Check both, because equal and uniform, even if you're not necessarily discussing it, that's a protection for you based on how the other properties are assessed. And so if you don't get a value you like, or you go to a hearing, you can always use that, and you don't have to. So we always just check both of those just as a protection, and then they will give you that evidence as well. So they'll give you their sales grid, if they have it on sales, which they probably do, and then they'll give you their equal and uniform grid, which is basically all the properties they consider comparable to you and how they have them appraised. And at the first step here, based on notice value, they're usually pretty equal because it's mass appraisal. So usually, if you're in a neighborhood code and you've got these properties, they generally do it on the same model. So you may not have a case there, but sometimes they'll shoot you their grids, a lot of times actually for residential, and their own grids will show a reduction. And so a lot of times on my homes, or if I'm doing a client's house, I'm like, hey, well, your grid's showing 50,000 less. Can we just use that number? So I think it's worth it. It's not really that challenging. And
okay,
we can always withdraw it if it seems like it's not going to go anywhere or it's wasting your time.
So would they ever ask what I feel like the appraised value is? Because the last year's appraised value is not significant. It's pretty low. I mean, it's obviously lower than the actual value of my house. Mm-hmm. But would they ask what I think the appraised value is?
They will. They'll say, what's your opinion of value? Because when you protest, that's what you're submit. You need to tell them what you want. And it doesn't have to be, you're allowed to have whatever opinion of value you want, because it's a subjective art market. There's not this, you have to prove exactly why you think it's this. So, I mean, you could say, hey, my opinion of value is $50,000. They might be like, come on. So, but you can say whatever it is that you think it is. And sometimes when we are dealing with, so we send in for all of our clients protectively something called affidavits. And that's just in the case something happens and we can't attend a hearing, just to protect their rights, because we don't want to lose our clients' rights. And on that, we don't put in it. It's the opinion of value 0, which obviously we don't think it is, but that's just a protective measure. And so you don't have to say an actual here, I did this analysis and this is coming up with 323,652. You can say, I don't think the value's gone up. I think my opinion of value is last year. I'd like to see y'all's evidence supporting an increase. So a lot of times, you can approach it that way. If you don't have your own evidence, just say, look, I don't see reason for an increase on this property. Nothing's changed. In my opinion, the market's gotten a little worse. We've seen interest rates rise. So I don't see justification for a value above last year. Can I please see your evidence? And they have to prove why the evidence went up. So even if you can't resolve it with the appraiser, you could go to a hearing with no actual, I mean, it's better to have some evidence of your own, but you could go with that approach too. I just don't think the district has ample evidence to support the increase.
Okay. And I mean, the thing that sucks is if the values go down, they're not going to send me one next year saying, oh, actually the value went down, so we're going to decrease your taxes, right?
They could.
It only goes up, really.
Well, they do go down. the trend has been up, but we've seen some values go down in Travis County. We saw a lot of residential roll on Travis County, but they were so aggressive last year on increases. So it's like, I think they should be going down. But we've seen that some commercial properties go down, like hotels. So for instance, during COVID, hotels saw a dramatic drop in revenue, and appraisal districts recognize that. So we saw a decline in values based on that. So their job is to get the market value every year. So theoretically, next year, if the market's worse, the values should go down. Now, whether or not they do that,
Right.
you know, I thought values would potentially be noticed down this year, but for most of the properties, it hasn't.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's super helpful. I just got this letter this week, and I was posting it in our Discord channel. I'm like, oh, perfect timing. So I appreciate the feedback. That's really helpful, especially because we're in Texas. So
yeah, and let me know, like, reach out if you're doing it and have any questions, and I can pull some comps and stuff if you need it, if you're going through the process.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks.
And one thing, Angela, I just got to say, next time you come on the show, you have to wear the hat backwards. That's
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
There you go. Yeah. Now you're
that is a requirement.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. Thanks for coming in and sharing, and a lot of really good information just for people that aren't in the same situation as you. So really helpful.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. See ya. So, and I like what Tanya has to say. Yeah, it's pretty cool that the burden of proof can rest on their shoulders and not ours, because I think a lot of times for the average investor, the person who's really looking to scale up or make progress in their portfolio, it feels like, man, if the government's against me, how am I even going to be able to do this? Or this is going to be a waste of time. And so just the fact that, no, there's a process for this. You go through the certain channels, the paperwork. Is it relatively inexpensive to just file the paperwork too, or what does that usually look like?
Oh yeah, there's no filing fee for this phase in Texas. So, and a lot of counties have moved towards an online dashboard. We're trying to codify that in the law where they have to, but you can just literally, you'll get your notice, you go on, set up an account, and you can file it. So there's in my opinion, there's really no reason not to for it. And then like in Travis County and Williamson County, they have you go on the dashboard, you submit, and a lot of times they'll just pop back an offer because, like I mentioned, they'll look at they appraise them on a mass basis. And so once you protest, the appraiser now has to look at your property on an individual basis, and they'll look at their grids and they might see, oh, wait, this grid has, $60,000 less. I'll offer that. And that might be great. And you might just take it and be done. Or you might say, I need more. And then you submit your evidence and you can have a discussion.
And for lack of a better word, is there much ego involved in this when you get into this? Because I know sometimes where it really, like you were talking about earlier, it's kind of a matter of opinion for a lot of these types of things. Do you run into that a lot? What's that like?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you're dealing with people, and in my practice, I, in most cases, have dealt with a lot of the same people for a decade now. And so it's all dependent on who you're dealing with. In my experience, the residential appraisers are less married to their values because they have such a mass job to do. And a lot of times at the counties, the residential appraisers can be more less seasoned, and so it's more of you come into the role in that role, and they're just trying to crank it out. The commercial appraisers, I've dealt with some of these guys and gals, like I said, for a decade, and some of them there is some ego and some personality involved because on some of the larger commercial properties, they have done a lot of research and they are a little bit more stuck on their valuation being correct. And so, we'll do hearings on those. It'll sometimes go for 3 hours and they'll get upset. That it's a little different than residential, but it's just it's the person. So it depends on who you're dealing with, but that's kind of for me, that's the fun of it. But I know if it's your own property, that's not so fun. So.
Well, yeah, especially when you see that tax bill come in the mail and it gives you that sticker shock where you're like, what? My mortgage just went up 40%. Like Karen said earlier, like that can provoke a lot of fear, anxiety, stress and not knowing if there's an actual, process that you can go through. It can feel like there's no way I'm going to have any ability here to be heard. But what I'm hearing you say, and a lot of people here, is like, yes, you can be. What is there? It's kind of a weird question. Is there a certain percentage of cases that actually get resolved or settled? I know you're mostly on the commercial end, so you probably don't see as much residential, but is it safe to say that a lot of these will, are legitimate things that can be overturned, or is it just kind of like, on a case by case basis?
I think for the most, so and our chief appraisal panel was talking about this, that they have seen such a rise in residential protests since they have seen also a corresponding rise in residential tax consultants. And so what they've seen on their end is that a lot of times some homeowners, or, if you're a landlord, you'll have an engagement with a consultant and you'll just say protested every year. So in that scenario, it might be that there's really not a great case, but your consultants, they're like, come on, let's do it, because they want to make some money. But they'll go through mass. Like, I'll see the residential consultants come in with just like stacks, and they just go through them. And so the majority of residential properties get resolved informally, because it's not necessarily something that's going to make sense before a board unless there's a great case. For commercial, I would say probably 40% of ours get resolved informally. And there's a couple of ways that happens. And there's, probably too much detail for that, but it actually might be relevant. So in Texas, you can settle informally and you're done. Or there's a new thing that's now it's in the tax code. We've been doing it for years, but it hadn't actually been codified. That's called a joint motion. And so you can agree, it's kind of like you agree to disagree, but you preserve your right to litigate. And so for residential, it comes in a little less often because most people probably aren't going to litigate their house, unless it's just a real high value house. But we do that a lot with commercial. So we'll say, hey, I think it's 3 million. You think it's 5. Let's joint motion at 4, and then I can still sue you if I need to. So we do that increases our, what I call settlement without a hearing, to probably 50%, and then the rest will go to a hearing.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and looking at the comments here, Lisa says in California, she just received her supplemental tax bill. It states that she has 60 days. I know Texas, he says 30 from the postmark date to argue, which hers is 25K. So hopefully California, do you know much about California's process at all?
Not too much. To be honest, I don't know that I can speak too intelligently to like the actual process of what you need to do there, but it sounds like maybe go ahead and try. I don't know on what property value of 25,000 is. Seems like it's overstating where your value should be. Then it would be worth it.
Yeah, just give Gavin Newsom a call. I'm sure he'll take care of it. Marilyn says, just for the info, Texas has no personal income tax, so property taxes are very important for state revenues. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we'll never have an income tax unless there's just a massive constitutional change, and I don't think that's happening. So property tax, that's why it's the hot button topic right now, because that's what we have. We have sales tax.
So the question, Rachel, is how many Californians need to move to Texas before the scales are tipped and you end up with a state income tax?
Oh, that's what we're dealing with right now, is that now it's like, okay, you've got these politicians. These ideas seem great until you dive into what the ramifications are. So, everybody's attacking property tax because it's a big expense, but nobody's wanting to decrease budgets. So we get rid of property tax or we cap it. That means our sales tax is going to go up. And in most places, 8%. That's a more regressive tax. So, you push that up to 12%. That's a big impact on lower income people. So it's just like that revenue's got to come from somewhere. And in Texas, since there's no income tax, it's property or sales, and property tax is the big one. So it's a big deal. I was looking at properties out of state. I'm like, wow, this is crazy that my line item is so much different when it's not this Texas rate. But that's kind of the system we've got here. So.
Yeah, and it's an important one for sure. And then, Marty mentioned a little bit in Washington also has no state income tax. Their property taxes are 1 to 1.1, depending on county. So if you want to move to Washington, Marnie is your girl. She'll give you all the information.
What are the sales tax rates there? I wonder, y'all just have a better budget process.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Well, they're not as good as Oregon's are. I know Oregon has no state sales tax.
Really? Okay.
Does Oregon still require it where if you go get your gas pumped or you go to get gas, they won't let you pump it yourself?
I was there, and that was weird. I didn't know that. But yeah, you couldn't.
You're not allowed to?
Yeah, they have to do the full service.
Did you think it was because you're a woman and they're like,
I was just confused. I'm like, I can pump my gas, but it was, and then my friend who lives there is like, no. Like, but they don't tell you there's no like manual that you're.
Yeah,
they're just
so dumb.
Yeah.
So like what happens? Like you get out to take the thing off and you can't, like you need a passcode to take the gas pump off.
Just a person.
There's a person there that's waiting.
What if he's busy pumping someone else's gas and you pull in? Like, do they like send out like security after you if you try to pump your own gas? Like you get a violation.
I guess you're supposed to tip because they're there. So I don't know. It's all this stuff, and they're like, I don't have cash.
Yeah, they'll clean your windshield. I mean, they'll do it all. AI might replace that soon.
Or they could just let you pump your own gas.
I think they're the only state that still does that.
I never knew that.
I wonder what that.
How have I never stopped for gas my whole life in Oregon?
It must be like some lobbyist group, like make sure that doesn't change. I don't know. That's.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll do a similar thing with like when cars are all self-driving. If we'll try to protect truck drivers' jobs.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like any job is safe right now. You actually had me thinking, Rachel, when you were describing how taxes can go up so significantly. There's a lot of people that are under the erroneous impression that when you pay off your property's mortgage, you own it free and clear. It's pure profit. And those of us that own real estate, if you really think of it, we know that's not the case. In fact, the mortgage is one of your biggest expenses, but I would bet repairs and vacancy are both higher than your mortgage. And now with these property taxes that we're hearing, those are expenses that go up every single year if you're in Texas. So it's not as simple as buying real estate and just paying it off and just coasting into the sunset. In fact, when you look at the overall market, this is me now, like this is just my opinion. Not everyone would share the same thing. The dream of not working anymore. I'm going to buy a bunch of real estate and retire. Is being significantly diminished. Okay. Can everybody here acknowledge it is really hard to find cash flowing deals, period. Okay. Now, on top of that, you got to worry about property taxes chasing you down when you think you're in the clear, that maybe your rent increases can't even go up as fast as those. What if you had the dream of, I want to be the person that buys a property and gives reduced rent to some family that really needs it? Well, the state's going to come after you and you're going to keep getting hammered, even as you're trying to help other people. I know this is not popular to say, but I'm just going out right now on record and saying, if your goal is buy a bunch of real estate to not work, strongly consider, if you pray, if you get counseling, if you meditate, whatever, that approach, that perspective could be dangerous to you. It might. Now, it doesn't mean you have to work away as a slave. It doesn't mean you have to work a job you hate. But I would much rather see people start a business or get into a position where they can do a job they enjoy than thinking if I just buy enough real estate, I'm not going to have to work anymore. Because as we're seeing these changes happen, it seems like that's getting harder and harder to accomplish. Just my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I had some great last year projections on my cash flow on my rentals, and a lot of that just got squashed with.
Yeah, and you didn't even make a mistake. Usually you have to screw up to lose money.
It's just like, wow, that property now I'm not cash flowing at all. I mean, I have great equity in it, I guess, but like.
Well, what can you do with the equity though? You sell it, now you got to go buy something else. Well, there's nothing to buy
right now
if you go buy it, you're now buying it at a higher price. If you do the 1031, which means your taxes are going to be even higher on that property.
Yeah.
Right. It's just this feeling of all the places we've been able to hide are getting taken away. They're coming after people that are trying to avoid working. And you have to be very purposeful about how you approach earning income. So I'm only saying this because no one else says it. Everyone else is the opposite. Give me 20 grand and I'll teach you how to work for 2 years and make a bunch of money. And now you don't have to work anymore. And that isn't very practical with what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. And right now, at least in Texas, unless the caps do go into play, there's really no sure way to forecast what that expense could be. So if you were banking on your cash flow for retirement at a certain amount and it was pretty close on what you needed, you really have no guarantee that your tax expense isn't going to double that next year, depending on what the market does. Now, if the caps go into play, then you can at least forecast it a little more accurately as far as the max. But right now, there's no way to do that. So the risk.
Can you sum up what you mean by the caps?
Well, so and right now at the legislature, it's kind of like what you guys have in California. One of the big pushes is to put appraisal caps in play. One of the pushes that just made it through the House, the Senate is likely going to stop it, was a 5% value cap for everything. And so what that means is each year your appraised value cannot increase more than 5% for all properties. So commercial, residential, everything, homestead, not homestead. We think that'll get squashed, but what they'll probably do instead is a 5. So right now it's 10% cap on residential properties that are homestead only. They might make that 5%, and they might make it for all residential. So that really does shift the burden to commercial property. So you're probably ultimately, you know, it seems great because it's like my value, if I have a residential portfolio, can only go up 5% a year, but that doesn't mean that your taxes can only go up 5%. So the tax rate set separately, and the way the calculation works is, you know, you've got the budget and you've got the taxable value, and it's just a formula. And so if your taxable value is going down because of these caps, mathematically your tax rate's going up. And so you might really not see a big difference ultimately if to offset those caps, the rates go up. And unless budgets are squashed, which hasn't really been the trend, rates would go up. So there'd be some more predictability on the value side if that happened. And again, this is a big if because we don't know. But there's, you know, the rates could go up more. And there's some predictability on rates too, as much as they can only go up a certain amount without an election. But what we see is when there's an election on rates, nobody shows up and it just passes.
Yes. And somebody mentioned that was in Texas. Let me see if I can find the comment here. I don't remember who they were, but they said that there are no income taxes in Texas. So property taxes are very important for state revenue. It's very unlikely that anyone in government, even in Texas, is going to vote for less revenue, which means that they will get paid less money or be able to hire less people to do the same amount of work. Every human being is going to say, yeah, let's raise revenue so that we can get a raise and you can hire more people and I don't have to do as much stuff. That is human nature. And that is part of the problems with these types of things is like you rarely ever see taxes come down. It's like you may fight to keep them going up, but if they go up a little bit, that now becomes the benchmark. They readjust the budget based off of that. All of a sudden, there's not extra money anymore. They're barely getting by, and they have to raise taxes again in order to do it. And there does come a point, everybody, you raise taxes enough where it logically makes sense to say we might as well be socialist. Okay, just think about that.
Yeah.
Taxes get to 80%. Are you going to fight to stay in a capitalist country? I mean, you almost are a socialist just by the mere fact that your taxes are at 80%. You're only keeping 20% of what you make. Now, you don't need as much money because the money that you're paying in taxes is theoretically going towards a lot of the stuff you used to spend money on yourself. But my example for this is always, I know we're getting a little bit far down my little rabbit hole here. Do you have a better experience when you go to a very high-end private restaurant that is competing for your business or when you go to the DMV? Okay. That is what you can expect, even though like you may get service. Okay. Maybe a better example would be a high-end restaurant or the chow hall in the military. Okay. Like you're being fed. Yes. Congratulations. It's not the same as if you're in a capitalistic environment where people are competing for your business. Patrick Bet-David made a great point, and it actually caused me, I'm trying to get Kyle to switch over too. I've been TSA pre-check for a while. It's better than being normal TSA. So I was happy with it. And then I heard Patrick Bet-David talking about clear. And I was like, well, he made a really good point. When you go to TSA pre-check, they're still rude as heck over there. Maybe not in Texas, Rachel, but in California, you get attitude for everything. Like people are irritated. They have to be at work. They have to be working. Now you show up at their job and ask them to do something. They're even more irritated. So the TSA people are just really rude. Don't acknowledge you. Don't care if you're waiting. because they're getting paid the same regardless. But it was still better than what I had before when I was normally just going to fly. So I was happy. Well, then I saw Clear and they're like, what can we do to get you to the front of the line? How can we carry your bag for you? What can I do to make this better for you? Like they're going out of their way to try to make you happier because they want more business. That's what you get with capitalism. If they don't, they lose business to somebody else versus TSA. They have no competition. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, this is concerning. Like Texas is still probably like the best place ever if you're trying to have freedom in America right now. But their property taxes are getting out of hand. And we're seeing this happen. It's the fluctuations happening too quickly. The values rose too fast. They printed too much money. Too many people have moved to Texas because they're not happy with the political environment of where they are. People flood in there. Prices go up too quickly. That brings up the comps in the area. And what we haven't talked about is grandma who's had her house for 40 years, right? And bought it for 50 grand and was paying $12 in property taxes at one point. And now, even though she's on fixed income, all the other money that's moving into that area is raising the comparable prices, which is raising her property, which is meaning her taxes keep going up and makes her quality of life lower. Like all of us listening to this are people that are pretty good with money, are pretty ambitious. We're financially savvy compared to average people. This sucks for us, but we can deal with it. But the people that aren't good with money, like you can really get hurt. So Rachel, I appreciate some of what you've been sharing here because it gives us a chance to fight back. Kyle, did we have somebody else that was going to come in?
We did, but unfortunately they had to take a work call, so they're not going to be able to jump on. But I agree with everything that you guys are both saying because Rachel, what you're doing is more important right now than it probably has been in years past, because with this shift and this focus of, hey, we need to move into more of a defensive mindset. We've let defense go away. This is a great defensive tactic for people that can make sure that they don't have money bleeding out left and right. So I love this stuff.
Yeah, I would just recommend go ahead and try protest. And even if you end up just saying, I don't want to do it, I'm going to hire a consultant. You're not, maybe you're out if they have a filing, like a base fee of $50 or not, but it's mainly if they save you money. So you're not going to save as much, but you're going to position yourself better going forward. So I would recommend just trying to manage that expense as much as you can. That's why the process is there.
Yeah, and knowing that you have a voice in the process too.
Yeah.
Rachel, can you share anything from the retreat? Just what your experience was like, what you learned, if you left with a different perspective than what you came with, kind of like what your goals are now after actually digging into them a little bit.
Yeah. So I came with a goal of how to accelerate my portfolio. So I've, in the past 3 years, I've just okay, how can I grow? How can I grow this portfolio? I've got 9 properties now, and it pretty quick time frame, but I'm I just need a next level. And what I left with was I need to stop. And not scared, but I just didn't have, it was more okay, we all are, we're busy and I'm just going to do this and do this. And it was more not a hobby, but it wasn't set up in a business with systems. And I wasn't really optimizing. So I do property tax, but I wasn't doing a good job on how to use my rentals against my income tax because I have a W-2, and to offset that, I hadn't done any of these strategies, and I was just trying to grow it without setting that up. And so after talking to you guys and everybody there, I'm I need to just put a pause and you kind of mentioned, get defensive and wait, and just kind of position myself to be in a healthier position.
Yeah.
But to pounce when the time is right, instead of just trying to do anything I can to keep growing. Because I started to get a little scared too. I'm whoa, if something shifts just like this, where my cash flows down and say one property goes vacant and then this, I don't want to go bankrupt. I don't want I want to be safe. So that was it was an awesome experience. Thank you guys for everything, Huston. It was great, and just great people too that came.
Really good people. And it's great having you there and being a part of that group and being able to contribute. The way you did tonight was what you did during the retreat too. And for anybody that wants more information, you can go to davidgreen24.com/retreats. David and I are starting to plan the next one. and we're really excited about it. We're already getting a lot of people that are interested in it. But David, you want to give any kind of sneak peeks on kind of what you're looking forward to about the next retreat?
Yeah, well, this one that we just had, I remember the conversations with Rachel, and it's kind of like your brain is, at least for me, it's a function of all the crap that comes into it. I call it crap, but it could be good stuff, right? So when you're hearing the sky is falling, then you look at the world like it's a scary place. When you're hearing you got to go buy more real estate, you think, well, how come I'm the only one not doing it? I need to go do more. And when you listen to podcasts, you don't get told the stories of the people that lost money. You don't get told the stories of the people that brought a deal or bought a deal that looked okay, and then the property taxes overcame what the profit was, and now they're losing money when they didn't know. You don't hear about the people that screwed up, who bought a property, lost their job, and now they're stuck and they don't know what to do because they didn't get enough equity, or they bought it with creative financing. There's a lot of things you don't hear. You only hear you need to be doing more. And I thought that was a cool experience because Rachel was able to share like all she's done probably more in the last couple of years than most people will do in half their life. It was like you've been operating, Rachel, at a breakneck pace, which is very impressive, but it wouldn't make sense to continue doing that, especially with the whole industry kind of grinding to a halt. There's not a ton of opportunity. It's not like it's appreciating as fast as it was before. Now is a better time to clean up some of the big chaos that was created and like reload so you're ready to go after the next round. In the next retreat we're putting together, it's going to be about real estate. Was it acceleration, Kyle? Real estate wealth acceleration, I believe that we called it. Yeah. So we're going to be like talking about your portfolio, what you actually have right now, what you own, what are the properties you should keep, what are things you might want to sell, what are ways you might want to change how you're managing it to optimize and make things most efficient. I think a lot of people never even considered getting property taxes lowered because we don't look at our portfolios. We're always looking at the next deal. We get it, we hand it off, boom, what's the next thing? We don't actually look at what we actually have and how we can efficiently maximize that. We talk about goals, what your goals are going to be, and what some better goals could be for you, or what would help you accomplish them. It's going to be diving into your brain and figuring out what can we do to unlock more potential that you've got? What can we do to unlock your specific skills? What would be the best use of your time and the best opportunities that are in front of you so that you can get some clarity on what you need to do moving forward? Because I think there's too much information. We don't have clarity. We're hearing this strategy and this strategy and this person and that thing and this news from the economy. And we're just absorbing all of this information, but we don't know how to line it all up and know what to do with it. So that's what that event will be about, as well as just trying to build relationships, right? Like we're going to know Rachel now for the rest of our lives. We're always going to be on Team Rachel because we actually got to know this person. It wasn't just someone who came to a live. This is a real human being that we have a relationship with now that was made in God's image. And we want to support, help her accomplish whatever goal she has. And as a result of that, we get to bless all you guys with the knowledge Rachel has, which, I mean, can everyone else agree? I've never heard anyone talk about this stuff before. I didn't even know this was a thing you could pay someone to do. What's that?
So exciting. I mean, everybody wants to talk about
property. Well, there's no downside. If you win, then you get a chunk of what you won them. They don't have to come up with any money. And if you lose, well, that's okay. It didn't hurt anything. Like it's exciting from that perspective if you're an investor. So I agree. And I believe we're going to be doing the next one in Fort Lauderdale. Is that right, Kyle? That's what
we're looking in Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, Florida. So different location, not Scottsdale this time. And yeah, it's exciting to you, Rachel. And that's what makes you so good at doing what you do. We were talking about this in Spartan League the other night. Like when you're calling different people to help you in your real estate portfolio or help you in your goals, one of the things you should be making sure is like, does that person actually enjoy what they do? Are they excited? Do they wake up excited to do their job every day? Because there's a lot of people out there that maybe are decent at what they do. They're good at it, but they're not excited about it. And those aren't going to be the people that you want in your corner. But like Rachel, you light up when you talk about it. And you obviously know your stuff. You've been doing it for over a decade. And so that's important. It doesn't have to be exciting to everybody else. But like the most important thing is that if it's exciting to you, that helps us as people. So thank you again for all of your wisdom, but also your enthusiasm around it too.
Well, thank you. And thank y'all both. And yeah, the retreat was really awesome. It was I would say it was a really transformative point for me to kind of to look at things differently going forward. And I think that's going to be great for me and my kids. And I met awesome people, y'all too. And then everybody who came, it's just like being around people that have this mindset of just wanting to do better together, I think was really awesome. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Very cool.
Well, thank you, Rachel. If people want to find out more about you or they want to follow you, where's the best place for them to reach out?
I'm on Instagram it's Real Investing with Rachel, like REAL. So that's probably the easiest. And then I can just send me a message if anybody has questions on the process of property tax. I'll try my best to answer. And if it's out of state, I can kind of refer you to people if you need help.
So go follow Real Investing with Rachel on Instagram and check out her videos of her leading protests through the streets of Austin, demanding lower property taxes or else. Thank you. Kyle, where can people get a hold of you?
You can come find me on Instagram. It's just my name at Kyle Renke, at KYLERENKE.
And what kind of things should people reach out to you for?
Yeah, great question. So if you're interested in retreats, if you're interested in Spartan League, learning more about what goes into that, or if you're looking to buy or invest or sell real estate, specifically in the Sacramento area, that's where I focus, but really in all of California, you can reach out to me and I can get you connected with any one of our David Green team members. We pretty much service the entire state. So reach out to me there.
All right. And please make sure you subscribe to the channel, guys. Thank you for joining me Friday. Thank you for being here, learning how to make your life better and not making decisions that you're going to regret tomorrow morning. Congratulations to all of you for making the smart move. We will see you next Friday.
Awesome. Have a great weekend. See you guys.
Thanks.